What if I told you you can get four QB1s after the 12th round in your fantasy draft? Let's get it.
Welcome to FaZe Fantasy Live with your host, Lonnie Z.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Man, we have a good one for you today. I know that your fantasy drafts are all coming up if you've probably had a couple of them already. So we're trying to get you as much information as possible so you can dominate your draft. Today, we're going to be talking about quarterbacks that are undervalued that we think that you can get really late in the draft and they can still help your team and actually be a solid QB1. Even though they're not really QB1s, they could be a fringe QB1 with a high upside QB2, but they can perform well enough. So if you decide to do your draft in a way where you pick quarterbacks late in the draft, these guys will be just fine for you because you've stacked your team in other ways where they'll make up the points in other areas. First off, we're going to talk about Derek Carr. Now, Derek Carr is really underrated. Over the past, ever since John Gruden's been there or arrived there, Carr has had over 4,000 yards passing each year. But the problem with the 4,000 yards passing is that he just isn't getting the touchdowns. So he's getting the 4,000 yards passing, but he's not getting the touchdowns, and the touchdowns are really key. Those are the things that we really need to see from Derek Carr. And so why? Why isn't he scoring touchdowns? Why can't Derek Carr score touchdowns? Partly because Derek Carr is not a rushing quarterback. He doesn't run very much. He does not score rushing touchdowns. And that lack of rushing production really hurts him as a fantasy quarterback. Now, last year, he posted career highs in yards and in attempts and in completions. And he was top 5 in all those areas, but he still has never finished as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And like I said, he just does not run. But a lot of that, I think, is because the pool of talent around him hasn't been so great. You're going to get arguments with that. They're going to say, well, Darren Waller. Yeah, Darren Waller was awesome for 2 seasons, a year and a half. He was like tight end 1 and had numbers that were going crazy for sure. But that was it. It was just Darren Waller. He was the only one. And then last year, when you think you're going to have Waller back, he's still not right. He's kind of healthy and just didn't have a good year at all, but emerges, Hunter Renfrow, who did a great year. He became a Pro Bowler. He had 9 touchdowns and 1,000 yards, 103 receptions because he was getting a lot of attention. But just with those guys alone having single seasons that are great, but the other one's not having a really great season, that doesn't turn into multiple touchdowns, multiple scores. And so bring in Davante Adams. Now, Davante Adams, he's a touchdown machine. I mean, he had 1 year with only 5, but he was hurt that year. Other than that, he's going to get you anywhere from 12 to, 15 touchdowns a year. And I know people were saying, well, he had the 97% target share in Green Bay. So that's why Davante Adams is so great. And he has the pro, Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, and Derek Carr is not that. So his year is going to drop down, and Carr's year is not going to get any better. I disagree. Last year, Carr threw for 4,800 yards with 23 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. Okay, he needs to cut down on the interceptions for sure, and he needs to turn up those touchdowns. If you even add 12 touchdowns because of Davante Adams being there, now you're at 35 touchdowns. And if Darren Waller could pick up another 5, which he definitely can, now you're looking at 40 touchdowns. I don't think it's a stretch to think that Derek Carr could throw for 5,000 yards this year and 40 touchdowns and be a top 10, finally get into that top 10 fantasy quarterback conversation. And if he, who knows if he scrambles and runs for a couple of touchdowns, that's just not his thing. But if he does, he can easily jump into the top 5. I just think that for what you're going to pay for Derek Carr in the draft, you may get him late. You may get him in the 11th, 12th round. Some drafts, he's not even drafted at all. So you may get him in the latter parts of the draft and have possibly a top 10 quarterback. Because of the weapons that are around him now, things are going to open up underneath for Hunter Renfrow because of Devontae Adams. Things are going to open up for Darren Waller, and if he's healthy, it's just going to be a nightmare for defenses to figure out who they're going to guard. Are they going to really focus on Waller? Are they going to focus on Adams? Josh Jacobs coming out of the backfield. Jacobs, they didn't redo his contract. They didn't sign his 5th year, so he's really motivated to have a big year this year. So that all plays in the Raiders' offense favor. I think the Raiders are going to do well. Josh McDaniels there, and he knows how to score. He knows how to put together an offense. He really, truly has an elite 1, an excellent number 2 in Renfrow, an elite tight end, a good quarterback, very good quarterback, and a good running game. So let's see what he can do with this offense. I think you can get Derek Carr cheap. You should be able to pick him up at the very end of your draft. If you decide to stack up in other areas and not worry about quarterback to the end, I think Carr will be there, and I think he'll do you just fine. Look for him late, rounds 11 to 14, and you may just have a top 10 quarterback on your hands. Okay, let's talk about Matthew Stafford. Now, Matthew Stafford had 4,886 yards last year, 41 touchdowns, 17 INTs. His QBR was 63.8, which was 4th. And he finished off QB6. He had the 11th most fantasy points per game. Great year. Now, you might think, well, why is he on this list then? Well, most people don't like to draft a drop back passer anymore. They would rather have the quarterback that is a mover, a scrambler, a runner like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. Those guys are the earlier round. And Josh Allen. Those are the earlier round guys that they'll go out and pick maybe sometimes before the 5th round. I mean, Kyler Murray still goes late. The drop back passer is not, a big priority in fantasy football anymore. If you're in a 10-team or 12-team league, you're going to need at least one quarterback, possibly 2 throughout the season. So if you don't get a top 5 quarterback, you have to figure out who you're going to get and where you're going to go get him. In a recent draft that I had, Matthew Stafford went in the 15th round. I just told you he was QB6 last year coming into Sean McVay's offense. And that's the difference between what he did last year and what he's done over his career, because over his career, he has had some seasons that have been greater than last year, that his numbers have been better. 5,000 yards passing, 41 touchdowns again, 16 INTs. He's had that before in 2011 when he had Megatron. And I know that's a long time ago, but he still has that in him. Obviously he does, because last year he did the same thing. It's the system. When you're a Sean McVay, all you want to do is put your players in position to be successful and score touchdowns. That's what you do. And so Cooper Kupp had a year for the ages last year. They went out and got Allen Robinson II, which I think, could be comeback player of the year in this system because he's good. Allen Robinson II is still a good player, and we'll see exactly how good he is in this offense. But I think this is really going to help him out, and it's not like a drop from Robert Woods to, Allen Robinson II. There's not much of a drop there. I think that, they are both about the same player. Robinson may even have more upside. If you're going to build your team where you don't get one of those top high-end quarterbacks and you decide, I'm just going to wait for the later rounds because I think I can get some good value, Matthew Stafford is one of the best values out there. He's still a bona fide QB1 with top 10 potential, possibly top 5 potential. Very, very cheap. You can get him after the 12th round. Like I said, he just went in the 15th round. So look for Matthew Stafford to have another good year. I think that he should finish top 10 with no problem. As long as he's healthy, he can definitely be your QB1. You could just plug him in there and know that his floor is probably about 17 and his ceiling is, 30 plus on any given Sunday. He's probably going to be anywhere around 18 to 25 points per week. Lock and load, stick him in there. That's what you're going to get. And if you build your team right, where you have other players in other positions, wide receivers, running backs, that are going to give you that higher end volume and that higher end points per game, then, as long as you're getting 18 to 23 points from your quarterback consistently throughout the season, you're going to be fine. You're going to be in a real good situation. And I don't think there's a better value pick out there than Matthew Stafford. If you are able to get him in the 14th, 15th round, you're getting a QB1, a bona fide QB1 with top 10, top 5 potential. That's, that you can't ask for much more than that. So go out, take a look at Matthew Stafford. If you're building your team that way, if you're going to wait to the later rounds, he's a perfect value pick for what you're going to get and where you're going to get him, how much you're going to pay for him in the draft. Boy, he's a wonderful pick. Go get Matthew Stafford. Okay, let's talk about our next quarterback. Let's talk about Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson at one time was an elite fantasy quarterback, but last year he had a down year. He got injured and he missed 3 games. His numbers were down, but in half of the games that he played, he was still a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So he played pretty good. Now, his rushing output was the lowest it's ever been in his career. It was only 43 carries and 183 yards last year. But he brings his aggressive passing game and running game to the Denver offense. Russell Wilson, in a recent draft that we had, he went in the 12th round. So people really aren't on top of Wilson right now. They're not going after him. I think that he still has a lot in the tank. If you look at the team and the situation he came into, Denver is under new ownership and they want a dynamic quarterback. They want a quarterback that's solid, that can pass, that is a veteran and savvy, but still young enough to lead them for years to come. Wilson's only 33, so he's still really young. He's still at the prime of his career. He's only going to get better. Actually, it's crazy how veteran quarterbacks get better with time. And as long as he stays healthy, in my book, he's still an elite quarterback. Now, obviously, he's not a top 3 or top 5, but you got to have that when you talk about really good quarterbacks or quarterbacks you hate to face. You got to bring Russell Wilson up. He's got to be in that conversation. With the change of scenery, I think it's going to do him really good. He's got Cortland Sutton, who's finally healthy off of that ACL tear 2 seasons ago. So now Sutton is healthy and he's projected to have a big year. Jerry Jeudy, once again, he was hurt mostly last year and his rookie year, he got hurt. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to have a good year. And Javonte Williams, man, that guy's a beast. If he carried the ball 20 to 25 times a game, he'd, be a top 5 fantasy running back for sure. But there's Melvin Gordon and they like to split the ball. But we'll see how they do it this year. Russell Wilson, if you want to wait on your draft, just like we're talking with all these quarterbacks, if you're in that mindset, I'm not going to draft a quarterback early. I refuse to. I can get value later. You can get an all-star caliber quarterback in the 12th to 15th round, in the later rounds. Russell Wilson is definitely one to keep your eye on in this draft. There's not been a lot of buzz about him. There's not been a lot of anything out there about him. He's kind of flying under the radar. Now, I picked him up in the 12th round. I took Lamar Jackson in the 3rd round this year because I really wanted Lamar, and I really think this is Lamar's year. But when I looked in the 12th round and Russell Wilson was sitting there, it changed what I was thinking. I was like, let me grab Russell Wilson as my QB2. And if anything happens to Lamar, I know that I have a QB1 just sitting there. But for me, he's going to be my QB2. I'm telling you right now, 12th round or later, if you can get a quarterback with the caliber of Russell Wilson, you are really going to be okay. Because if that's the case, and this is what we've been talking about this whole podcast, if you're drafting and you're not wanting to get a quarterback till later, there are some values out there. There's some really solid quarterbacks. Here's another one in Russell Wilson. He passed for 3,113 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, only 6 INTs. And he missed 3 games, over 3,000 yards passing with 25 touchdowns. I'm telling you, if he stays healthy the whole year, he may be in the top 5. Russell Wilson in the 12th round or later, he's flying under the radar. I know I just said that Matthew Stafford might be the value pick of them all, but boy, Wilson can make a case for himself that he might be the value pick. Now, you might have to pay up a little bit to get him. You're not going to find Russell Wilson. I don't believe you're going to find him in the 15th round like Matthew Stafford. That's why I say he's the value pick of them all. But in the 12th round, maybe 13th, 14th round, if you're able to get Russell Wilson, he's still there. You look and he's there. That is a diamond in the rough. So great value. He's a QB1 for sure. He's still QB1. He's going to bring excitement and energy to Denver. They're hungry. They have something to prove. He has a good cast around him. Look for Russell Wilson to have a big year. And if you can pick him up after the 10th round, then you're doing something. And he's a great value for a number 1 QB1, probably a top 10 quarterback. Go to FazeFantasy.com and pick up your draft kit today. It's loaded with hundreds of hours of research, rookie reports, current ADP rankings, beat writers' info for every team, video breakdowns, draft selection advice, consistency charts for quarterbacks and running backs. Go grab it today, and when you enter the promo code FAZECAST, that's FAZECAST, you'll get $5 off. It's only $15. That's the most inexpensive draft kit on the market today. Drafts are right around the corner, so get yours today. Use promo code FAZECAST and save $5. That's just a $10 investment to win your draft. It's well worth it. Get yours today and dominate your draft. FazeFantasy.com. Okay. Let's talk about our final quarterback on the list, Kirk Cousins. Now, before you turn off the podcast or say, Lonnie, you're crazy, Kirk Cousins, what are you talking about? We're talking about late round value quarterbacks, late round value picks, quarterbacks that can be a QB1. If you get them that late in the draft, they can still work as a serviceable QB1. Now, we know that Kirk Cousins has not been a QB1. He's been a QB2. He hasn't had a top 10 fantasy finish for the season since 2017. So it's been a long time for him. But let's just look at his numbers. 4,221 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 INTs. 33 touchdowns with 7 INTs. So he's 9th in touchdowns. He's 9th in yards. He's tied for 7th in INTs. So that's all top 10 stuff right there. So why isn't Kirk Cousins a QB1 and why can't he finish in the top 10, fantasy top 10? Well, one thing, he just does not run. He gets a touchdown a year with his feet. I mean, that's what he averages. And so he doesn't run. He has a career high 179 rushing yards. I mean, he doesn't use his legs very well. And so he's purely a drop back pocket passer. Why is he on this list though? I mean, I could have put a couple other guys on this list, but I chose Kirk Cousins because this year there's something different. This year he's going to be playing in an offense that's set up to score. I mean, he already had 33 touchdowns with Mike Zimmer as his head coach. 33 passing touchdowns with Mike Zimmer as his head coach. I mean, that is pretty good. Now, here comes Kevin O'Connell and that LA Express, that offense that we've talked about when we talked about Matt Stafford, and now we're going to talk about Kirk Cousins. Here comes Kevin O'Connell, and he's bringing that show to Minnesota, and he's going to be getting the ball spread around. They're going to be putting pressure on defenses, and Kurt's going to be able to sit back there and just drop dimes. He's got Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook. I mean, he's really set up. The offensive line isn't that bad. It's not the greatest, but they've had worse. So he's really set up to excel this year. Now, the only way I would take Kirk Cousins and put him on my team as my QB1 is if I can get him really late in the draft and I can really build my team and stack my team the way I want to, and it's not contingent on how my quarterback plays. If I'm just looking for a consistent quarterback that's going to get me 15 to 20 points a game and every now and then get me 23 to 27, Kirk Cousins is my guy. He recently went in the 15th round in a draft I was just in, right next to Matt Stafford. Him and Stafford went back to back. Matthew Stafford obviously has the better upside or bigger upside. But in this offense, I think it's easy to say that we can envision Kirk Cousins getting 4,500 yards to maybe 5,000, 4,900 yards, right? I think the 33 touchdowns can turn into a 40 touchdown campaign this year. 33 touchdowns in that offense last year. I think he can turn that into 40. The interceptions, that's not a problem. 7 INTs, that's great. His QBR was 52. That's 15th in the league. So if you're really looking for a value and everyone's gone, the other three guys on this list that we were talking about are all gone, and there's Kirk Cousins sitting there, I'd take Kirk Cousins. I'd take him before Zach Wilson. I would take him before Trevor Lawrence. I'd take Kirk Cousins. If you can get him in the 14th to the 16th rounds, he's still sitting there, and you need a quarterback, this is your guy. You can feel like, okay, my draft is all right. I still have Kirk Cousins. I know he's not the greatest quarterback in the world. He's not a true QB1, but he does have QB1 upside this year. He has potential top 10 QB fantasy finish in him this year. He definitely has the talent. Everyone's saying that Justin Jefferson is going to be the fantasy player of the year, which to me is kind of tough to put on anybody. I don't know how everyone's figuring that. Jefferson's going to be really, really good. If he stays healthy, he's definitely going to be a top 3 fantasy wide receiver. And I think Adam Thielen is going to be a top 20, top 15 fantasy wide receiver when it's all said and done this year. So Cousins will have the weapons. If you're looking at it for a good value, really late in your draft, and you're kind of, reaching for straws there, and he's there along with a few other guys, he's your guy. Go get Kirk Cousins in the 15th round. If that's where you're at and you don't have a quarterback on your team yet, or you want a solid QB2, Kirk Cousins is your guy. So there's our 4 quarterbacks. These are the guys that we think that you can get at a very low cost, but they can have really high ceiling for you at that QB1 position. So go out. I hope this is helpful for you. If it has been, please go to our YouTube channel, FaZe Fantasy Live, and subscribe. Subscribe to this podcast. And we have a TikTok. Go to TikTok, subscribe to that. Check out some of our little short videos. We break down players in a minute or less and give you a bunch of information about that player packed into those videos. So please support the channel and do those things. We'll keep bringing this content to you. And you have a great draft. Go get them. We'll see you on the next one.